Welcome to Rise of the Goddess Collective podcast. I am your host, Michelle Julian, your goddess guide. That's right, I guide you. I don't coach you because here at the Goddess Collective, we know that you can coach yourself. And I am so excited because Maria will tell you all about her journey online and her evolution of learning that she too is the guide, is the facilitator, and how this all unfolds for her as she moves into 2025. Thank you, Maria, for being here. Thanks so much. I'm so excited to start this conversation with you. How are you today?
I'm amazing. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on your show, on your podcast. I know we're going to have a really delicious conversation. So, for those of you tuning in, you are in for a treat, if I may say so myself. And I am excited because if there is anything that I know about the two of us is that we can plan, we can intend, and this conversation is going to take a life of its own. So wherever you want to start, I'm game.
Awesome. Well, I want to start with a post that I read recently online,
Okay.
and I think that's a great place to start because isn't that why we're all online to share our wisdom and to see who resonates with it and how we can engage in that conversation and contribute in a positive way versus in a contaminating way. So the concept of being paid for your very existence
Mm.
is intriguing. How do you redefine traditional perceptions of value in the coaching world to align with this principle?
I love it. And I love that you picked up on the things that I've been sharing. I think before we dive into answering the question, for those of you who have no idea who I am, I have been sharing myself online for, gosh, like the last 12, 14 years consistently, right? So yes, if I'm doing the math correctly. And the entire time I have been in the transformation space. I started my career as a professional ballroom dancer and high performance coach for other dancers. So that was my entry into the world of personal growth, transformation, creating results. And from there on, I became a coach within a business and marketing space and embarked on my own entrepreneurial journey. And I've definitely gone through different seasons and a journey of my own where certain things that I once believed in are no longer the things that I now believe, right? And there's continuous process of just shedding layers and stepping into myself. And if I look back on my path up until this point in the dance space, right, I would get paid for my expertise as a dancer, right? For my skill set as a dancer, for my gift, my talents as a dancer, and also my ability to then support others in being able to, create the results that they wanted for themselves. And back then, it was really about how can I upskill myself to a certain point and up level my reputation to a certain point so that I could be paid what I wanted to be paid, right? Like it was a very on one hand side, sort of intuitive game, but also a very strategic game, because the more awards you had, the more well-known you were, the more championships and the medals you had, that definitely opened certain doors of opportunity. And so it was very much a pursuit of my own desires that would lead to being paid, right? When I retired as a dancer and stepped into the world of entrepreneurship, like that was a mind fuck, excuse my French, in many ways, right? Because you were in this space that, is based on promises. And I think that's sometimes my biggest challenge, right? With guiding others, is what is that fine line between making promises but also delivering results, right? And if there's anything I get excited about is getting paid for results, right? So and I've tried different things, as a business coach, as a mindset coach for entrepreneurs. I mean, I've done it all, or at least it feels like it, right? And this idea of now being paid for your very existence is recognizing that it's less about what you know, or what you say you know, or what you say you don't know, and it's more about the impact that you have on those around you, just through your presence. Right now, your presence does not automatically entitle you to paychecks. Right? But it does boil down to the depth and the level of impact that we have on others. Right? And I believe specifically in the world of coaching, right? I'm imagining a lot of listeners and those tuning in, right, in that space of being in some form of a guide for others. I believe that it's really important to be in the ongoing practice of embodying your own work, and simultaneously challenging the collective norms that we all have bought into.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because as a coach, you oftentimes hear like, oh yeah, get paid for your expertise, right? And I used to believe that for long periods of time. And I think that ultimately, when you recognize that you can get paid, and paid not just monetarily, right, for your very existence, I, at least when I started entertaining that, became aware of all of the limitations that I have set for myself that were actually getting in the way of me being able to do that, right? And so being able to go, okay, well, what if I could get paid for my very existence, right? How comfortable would I be? Receiving that, accepting that, holding that, multiplying that, paying that forward, right? And so essentially finding your ways in which you are uniquely equipped and positioned to be of service to others, and then strategically structuring them in a way that is not tied to your time, right? And trading your time. I think that is really what we're going to be seeing more and more of emerge, because there's only so many hours that we all have in a day. Right. And I believe that ultimately we're here to experience the fullest expression of who we are and what life has to offer. And while work is a big, big part of that, oftentimes way too much gets lost in the traditional concept of work, or even the traditional concept of business. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
You did, absolutely, positively. And that's the remarkable thing, I believe, is about you and your essence. So when you're asked a question, you fully answer it with all of your capacity, so you know who you're talking to. Like when we first started this podcast, you said, who is your audience? Are these people that have been, online forever? Or, I mean, where do we stand with this, this audience? And so basically, no matter where you're starting, I think the journey, it's good to just know that it doesn't matter where you start or when you start, it's just about starting, right? So you're kind of giving that like fresh like look for people. I feel like we need to kind of I don't know, burn down the old coaching paradigm of this is the way you need to do it. And I think you have always been that kind of coach doing that. But now, of course, everybody is thinking, maybe I need to do that too, because actually, I can see there's a lot of watering down of messaging in this online space for business and, life coaches. So, how do you personally kind of define your own like transformation that you've gone through in the coaching experience? How do you create each moment to
Mhm.
your client?
That's such a good question. And I've so I believe that, and I would imagine that a lot of people tuning in, right? Like you care about making a difference in other people's lives, right? That's why you're choosing to be online, whether you're just considering doing that or you have been doing it for a while, like the idea of making a difference in other people's lives, like makes sense to you. It excites you. And you know that you have something of value to offer to others, right? In whatever way or shape it takes, right? Not just necessarily through coaching, it might be through your art, through your services, whatever it is that you do. And when I was actively growing my coaching practice in recent years, what I could see very, very clearly is that three things had the biggest amount of impact in what I was doing, right? So first, it was my own personal journey, right? So this is how deeply have I met myself, like how honest I am with myself about myself, right? How willing I am to take ownership of who I am, of where I am, of what's happening, of what's not happening, right? And it's just the quality of my relationship with myself um, based on the sense of potential that I have for myself. Not based on where I think I should be by this age, or not based on what I see everybody else is doing, but like if it's just me and me, like how in love I am with me, in all of me. You know what I mean? So it's like it would
Yes.
always be what is the depth and the intimacy and the like truth of the relationship that I have with myself, right? So there was always like that aspect, right? The second one was the actual craft of coaching, right? Because oftentimes people think like, oh, coaching is a business, it's a passion, it's whatever. At the end of the day, coaching is a skill,
Mhm.
right? And what anybody can learn a skill, right? And the more competent and confident one becomes in a certain skill set, in this case, the skill set of coaching, right? The more you begin to trust yourself. Like I at these days, I don't prepare for calls. I don't prepare for even conversations like this. I just trust myself. Like no matter what happens, I know that I will have within myself the intuition, the knowing, the whatever to hold space to guide the conversation and to really arrive at a very constructive, empowering, supportive place, right? So there is always that development of craft that would play a role. And then the certain was the business model itself, because there are so many ways in which all of us could offer our gifts to the world. And sometimes we try it a certain way, you know, it might work, it might not work. Sometimes we follow our coaches and mentors guidance and we try to do it a certain way, and it might work, it might not work, right? But then the business of whatever it is that you do is just one aspect of what plays a role on your results and in your ability to create these really deeply impactful moments with whoever it is that you serve in whatever capacity that is, right? And so for me, I would always go, okay, my relationship with self, like, and what is that? Because that's the true magnet, the core, the essence of everything, right? What's my, you know, commitment and willingness to continue improving in my own craft and developing and growing in my own craft? And then what shape and form does that actually take from a business perspective, right? And so considering those three things at all times would really allow me to create something that would feel authentic to me and that would feel real to me. And because it felt real and authentic to me, it would also be real and authentic to those that I was meant to touch at that point in season in life. And I'm not saying that all of the moments that I've had with my clients were perfect. I've had plenty of moments that were not, you know, I'm sure if you ask the clients, they'd be like, oh no, that fucking sucked. I'm, you know, right? And that too, it's a little bit like out their perspective, but that too, I trust the perfection of it. Just like I've had moments with my past coaches and mentors that, you know, didn't go as pleasantly, right? But it all served a purpose and it was meaningful because there was a lot of growth and wisdom and essentially opportunity to be distilled, right? So when in answering your question of like, how do you create those moments for your clients, is you create them for yourself first and foremost.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because I would always call people out when they would say that, you know, they do what they do because they want to make an impact. I'm like, yes, that sounds wonderful. And I also don't believe you, because we as humans are very selfish, period. And so we do what we do because we want to. And or we cannot imagine not doing it, right? And so it really is a matter of creating real moments with yourself that then establish a space in which your clients, your community, right, can experience that for themselves. But that can only come from within. At least that's my experience. I might be wrong.
What?
Um,
You're wrong. You're never wrong.
oh no,
Never right all
trust
the
me, I
time.
can't be wrong. I can't be wrong. Yes.
True, true. So funny that you're using the word self, 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 right? So it's so interesting because, I prepared for this podcast interview because that's who I am. I prepare. I'm type A personality, Capricorn, manifesting generator, all those things, right? And then my higher power is channeling me right now to say, hey, Michelle, she keeps using the word self, self, self. You got to talk about self, right?
Yes.
So it's the self energy, right? So for me, self energy is all of my parts, right? All of them. There's no bad part of who I am. And so, with being a facilitator and a guide, how do you integrate all
Mm-hmm.
of your parts when you are online
Mm-hmm.
with the social media world, which we all know can be very shiny and very confusing? How
Mm-hmm.
do you do that integration piece of the self energy?
I love it. I love this question so much because the first answer that popped to me as you were saying it is my favorite answer to every sexy question. And it's I would joke, I'm like, this is the very unsexy answer to your very sexy question. And the answer is practice. Right? How do you integrate? You practice integrating. How do you do that? Well, you figure it out, because what works for one person does not necessarily work for the other person. And I can share what that has looked like for me over the years, because again, I've practiced different schools of thoughts. I've gone on all kinds of different crazy challenges, to really explore and trial and error what would work for me, right? And I believe it's a blend of uh, keeping yourself accountable to a certain discipline, right? Because you cannot collect enough data without consistency. And I find that if people are new to the online world, right, or they are very easily impressionable by what happens in the online world, right? Like you're working with the wrong sets of data points. And the only accurate self of data point is really like how you feel in the process of doing something for long periods of time, and what is the results that you get from doing something for long periods of time. And long is relative, right? We're just talking about like consistency over time. And so I personally, I have, gone through phases where I would unfollow everybody.
Mhm.
Right? And I would remove any input so that I could actually hear myself to see what I would want to put out there into the world, right? Like I would remove that outside input to go, well, if I did not have that input, which by the way, I learned that it's impossible to do that, because even if you unfollow everybody, these social media platforms will still put content in front of you.
Yeah, they almost start talking like you talk. You're like, wait a minute, that's my
Yes,
information.
yes, yes. But I would get really curious, right, about like what would emerge from me if I removed outside input altogether, right? So that was a super fun way for me to integrate the self energy, because it would be like, well, what do I care about? If I didn't know what I'm supposed to be talking about, if there was nobody in my ear telling me what I should do, to increase your conversions to blah 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 blah, like what is coming right from this deeply truthful place. And so that was a really fun way to practice. And some other ways in which you can integrate, or what has been supportive for me to integrate that self energy, is to uh, recognize that people feel you way before they hear you, see you, read you, watch you, you name it. And I think the more we can practice not bullshitting ourselves,
Mhm.
right? The more meaningful connections we can actually create with others,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And these days, I shared that with my husband the other day. I was like, you know what? These days, if I were to hire anybody, like I don't trust hiring people that don't, for example, do stories.
Mhm.
I want to see your stories, right? Because if I get a peek into your life and what you do, that actually tells me a lot more than what your perfectly written, copywriting, perfected post tells me, what
Mhm.
you do. No,
Right.
I want to see what are you up to in the morning? What do you eat? Like, where do you go? Who do you hang with? Like, what does your house look like? Right? Like that gives me a lot greater like insight
Mhm.
into who you are as a person,
Yeah.
and whether so the answer to your question again is practice, and really being in that space of recognizing what is actually supportive to you, what is adding to your joy, what is adding to your bank account, what is adding to the fun, the level of fun you have on a daily basis, and allowing yourself to do more of that and less of whatever else, especially whatever else everybody else tells you to do.
I love it. I love it. So, what I'm hearing you and just kind of feeling
Yeah.
you is there's a lot of self reflection, there's a lot of self awareness, contemplation happening minute by minute, second by second. You're not just aimlessly going online and winging it, really, basically. You're not winging it, you're contemplating every time you're doing a share, whether it's with your personal life, your husband, or with what you've done with your business and your clients. And I think that that is on some realm of vulnerability, really, because I mean, it's not shiny. It can be a little bit misjointed and kind of messy, even like, oh, look at that. My part of my, thing that I shared on stories didn't come out like the way I probably wanted it to come out. So you have this vulnerability component of sharing, and that's kind of what I feel like your evolution has been. That's why I've kind of stalked you for many years online and
Yes.
finally got you to come on the podcast here at Rise. You're like, thank you for your persistence. I'm like, yeah, like, because I am that type A personality. I do
Yeah.
actually don't ever
Yeah.
take really no for an answer. Like, literally, when people say, well, not now, I always go, and when do you think?
When? Yes.
So, like, that's been a whole journey in itself. That's like a whole podcast we could talk about, right? It's that vulnerability piece and evolution of being, okay, you were using the word coach. Now you're not using the word coach, right? You're using other words, or you're showing what you are
Yeah.
becoming. You're being and you're becoming, right? That's kind of what happened for the Julian method. I was the Julian method and cultivated self-care practices for my clients, and then boom, the pandemic happened and I had to create this whole vortex of the portal of being online. And what was that going to be for me? And so I created this being state that I've kind of grown into, and then my becoming state, which is taking the action. So the feminine side is being, the
Yes.
becoming is the masculine. And so, just to define your being state and your becoming, what would you say your being state has been with this evolution and your becoming?
Mm. I would say my being state has been about presence and being in the practice of presence, meaning in this moment and in this one and in this one and in this one, right? And really bringing myself out of the heady space, right, to the present feeling and experiencing space.
Mhm.
Um, because I don't know if you can relate, if those of you watching can relate, but I spent way too much time in my head in the past, right? And especially as part of my entrepreneurial journey. Um, and what I have discovered is that the best way to figure things out is to try them. There is no amount of thinking about something, right? Planning something, masterminding, dreaming in your head that's going to actually give you the wisdom of the experience when you do it, when you live it, right? And so I have really been in this practice of being present with what is without, to the best of my ability, judging what is,
Mhm.
right? And just allowing myself to have that experience and be with the experience without labeling it,
Mhm.
right? But also really appreciating and savoring what is unfolding, be that perceivably good, not so good, irrelevant, right? But just being with it. So that has been my being state. My becoming has been and is that's a good question. Now I'm like, my becoming. My becoming is really in my fierceness. Like there is this concept that actually Alex, my husband, came up with, and we talk about it often, is, fierce fucking leadership, right? And fierce fucking leadership implies fierce leadership, right? And again, it's the leadership of self, but it's also not shying away of that being the leadership of others, those that you are here to impact, those that you are here to support, right? And being in that has been a becoming practice of not toning myself down just so that my leadership or my perspective can be more palatable and more nice, and hence less whatever, right? And so like really leaning into more of the fierceness of
Mm,
what I believe, of what I see, of what I know is possible,
mm,
um, and like fully owning that.
I love that because fierceness is what we really need right now. We
Yeah.
cannot, we cannot waver. We cannot, hmm, I guess the word I'm trying to say is we can't be making niceties. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't mean that we need to be aggressive. It just means that we need to stay true to that
Mhm.
self energy of fierceness and what that feels like for you in your becoming state, and vacillating between the being and the becoming state, because as we agree that we don't always have our shit together.
We never have our shit together. Whoever tells you otherwise is lying. Everybody figuring it out. That's it. Some are just doing it with a little bit more confidence and better branding. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is like, I love that, you are thinking really kind of out of the box. For me, I feel like it's the out of the box, in that we're looking to really change the paradigm of really what guidance, facilitation, and coaching is all about,
Yeah.
and creating a community, because you are all about that. You've been doing that for years and years, even with your coaching, right? So now in this evolution where you are with your husband and creating all these other opportunities, it's almost like, to me, as I'm making my own assessment of you, this is a legacy. This is a legacy in the making, real time.
Yeah.
Anything's possible. You're ready. You are so on and ready that
Mhm.
I literally could jump on a plane with you. And if I said to you, we're going to go and meet Oprah, you'd be like, let's go. Right? You would totally not even like second think that thought. Am I right?
I mean, I might freak out, internally, but I would rise to the occasion.
Absolutely.
I know
Absolutely.
I have enough tools in my toolbox to coach myself through my own, yes.
Exactly, because you've gotten your uniform dirty. I say this all the time in my podcast. How are you getting your uniform dirty? What does that mean, Michelle? It means like, have you done your stomach crunches? Have you done the work that's required for you to show up in the skin of what you're talking about, right? You actually have gotten your uniform dirty and then some, right? So it's not like you have to prove that to anyone. You don't need to prove it to me. You don't need to and prove it to my audience because I've already told them that this is the real deal. This is not making things up. We are authentically in this podcast making things, changing things, huge, huge. So we could talk forever, and I would love to. You know that about
Yeah.
me. So I want to know, because I'm very curious about this.
Yeah.
You are aligning with your husband
Mhm.
and you're opening some doors about relationships and
Yes.
basically how couples could make
Hmm.
their legacy of success.
Yeah.
So, what brought you to that?
I love this because again, for those of you who don't know me all that well, my story, my husband and I, in a couple of days will be 12 years that we've met. We've been married, I want to say for 7, if I'm doing the math correctly. And we started our first business in 2014. I believe we launched our first online course. And if you think doing an online course in 2014, like that's before courses were cool, you know? And we learned a lot during that time. The certain members of that community that we created um, a decade ago, I still very much a part of our life and what we are doing. And back then, what we arrived at is that we were much better lovers than we were business partners. And so we decided to do our own individual things professionally and just focus on being in relationship with each other, right? And I celebrate us for doing that back then because I think if we were to kind of like try and make things work, I don't know if we, would be where we are now because all challenges, they're personal challenges, right? Disguised as business challenges, money challenges, whatever, right? And for us, it got complicated because my internal stuff was complicated, his internal stuff was complicated, and it was just, manifesting itself in this business that we were trying to build. And so we kind of went our separate ways. And in the stage that we're in now, it simply no longer makes sense for us not to do things together. Like the space and the season we are in is that we can do both. We can be husband and wife, we can be friends, we can also be business partners, and we can do a lot of good together because when we come together, we amplify each other, right? And so we always talk about this concept where, 1 + 1 = 10. Like
Mhm.
it's not just and when we're building stuff together, right, is essentially I bring my experience, expertise, and my genius. He brings his experience, expertise, and genius. And then there is the two of us as a unit that has its own experience, expertise, and genius, right? And so it was just our impact together and what we could create together will go much, much further than what we could ever do separately, right? At least that's what feels true to us. And so we launched an initiative called Married Millionaires. And it's a very selfish initiative, I'm not going to lie. And that is to really align with and link arms with other like-minded, like-hearted, like-spirited couples that want to do life and business with. And we did that because, quite frankly, we got tired looking for those people outside. We've been attending events, joining programs, masterminds, you name it, for a very, very long time. And we kept hoping, like, okay, maybe here we'll find our people. Maybe here we'll find our people, right? Maybe,
Yes.
we join this community, we'll find our people. And while we've definitely met some cool people and we have some really awesome friends sprinkled all around the world, it's now a time to create a space where our people can come to us and we can create together, right? And really align around a shared vision.
Mhm.
And so we are really, really excited about what we are doing and the kind of collective impact that we're going to have by really joining forces with more couples like us, because that is not just impact and money made, that's generations changed.
Correct.
And that excites me a lot.
Yes, I can see it. It's the legacy. It's the
Yeah.
legacy. I mean, who doesn't want to leave a legacy of, possibility of anything is possible? Like, we do not have to think small ever. And having someone like you and your husband be modeling that and having others collectively come with you, it
Yeah.
just makes total sense to me. When I saw that you were doing that, I was like, oh my God, of course she's doing that. I mean, that makes total sense to me. You know what I mean? I'm just like, that was like a no-brainer
Yeah.
shift change thing. I mean, it's almost like I kind of saw it before it came. I'm like one of those kind of like visionaries. I'm like, I see where she's going. I see
Yeah.
what she's doing. She's gonna be, yeah, she's going over there. And like being in that with your partner, like so many things will open up for you, not just for the business and the community, but you're gonna learn even more about each other in ways that are going to blow you away. Why am I saying this? Because my husband and I, right? He's a chiropractor. He's a retired chiropractor. I am like semi-retired, body worker. And we put our heads together about, I don't know, right before the pandemic,
Mhm.
in that we collectively can change the paradigm of couplehood
Yeah.
dating in a way that's super, super proactive. And how we're doing that is we are doing our own internal self energy work
Yeah.
on all of our parts and integrating our parts alone. And then when we come together, we share things that, maybe we had difficulty sharing, but now we don't, because that self energy is now an understanding. So it's like you're given that language, right? Of understanding who you're with, who you are, and how you contribute to the relationship, or how you potentially created some suffering. And
Yeah.
so when you're in that realm of working with the self energy and then expanding your own self, right? Personally. And then my
Yeah.
husband's expanding his self, like he's got all these things going on now, where
Yeah.
it's opened up all these like firing ideas like, oh, I could do this, and that's the name I'm gonna call it, and da da da. And it's
Mhm.
only happening because we both are here for that same legacy purpose. Like, how am I contributing to my well being, and how can I share that with others? And that's what
Yeah.
I see you and your wonderful husband doing pretty much. Pretty much, I didn't know the details of like working together, not working together. I've always thought you guys are working together. I never even saw the separation, so I don't know what you're talking about. But besides that,
Yeah.
okay, I love it. I love it all. And I want people to find out
Yeah.
about this. And
Yes.
how do they do that? How do they reach out to you and start having conversations with you?
Yes. Well, I think we would absolutely love to have an opportunity to have a conversation. And the best way to do that is to actually just go to marriedmillionaires.com and to experience our latest masterclass that we hosted. I think that will give you a really good idea and a really good vibe check for whether or not you feel inspired and expanded in our presence, and whether or not you resonate with what we're up to and where we're headed and why we're headed that way. And if you do, then there will be an opportunity for you to take that next step, for us to connect, for us to get to know each other, to see if we're headed in the same direction. But I would say if you are looking for mentors, for partners, for friends who will show up in a way that empowers you to show up and to be and do and have more than you otherwise would, right? And I would say that's a really good and really easy place to start.
Awesome. I'm so excited for you and your honey. It's so exciting to see both of you doing this journey together and changing people's lives in such a positive way. Keep shining that light. Absolutely. Do you
That's
have
the plan.
anything? Do you have anything that you want to share with the audience? If like you had, like one thought that you just have to share, what would that be?
The one thought that keeps popping up for me internally is an invitation for those of you listening to keep um, trusting yourself and developing your capacity to trust yourself. Because when you know how to trust yourself, and you're in the practice of trusting yourself, trusting your path, trusting the inspiration and the intuition that is not always logical or practical, right? And you trust the higher power, irrespective of what you believe in, then that offers a lot of space to actually enjoy all of the creations, the ideas, the execution, the learnings, the failures, right? Because ultimately you are honoring you and loving you and respecting you enough to say, actually, I am my own highest authority. And if I know how to trust myself based on what feels real and true for me, I can't go wrong. So I invite all of you to really sit with that trust and also do that trust justice, right? Because it's easy to trust when everything is going perfectly, but where it counts the most is when shit hits the fan and things don't go as perfectly, right? Can you still have trust? Can you still lean into the perfection of it all, and be within, right? Knowing that ultimately everything is happening to your highest and greatest advantage at all times. And if you listen and you hear and you act on what you hear and you trust that, that ultimately you can never go wrong. At least I don't think I ever have. But again, I might be wrong.
Exactly. This is what I love about you. You're like, so this is what I'm thinking, this is what I know, and I could be wrong.
Try it out. I mean, try it out and let me know if you
It's an
find anything
experiment.
better.
Isn't life an experiment? I mean, I have been saying this to my husband now, really kind of the last like 5 or 6 years. We're in that chapter of our life where it's like, let's just focus on experiences
Yeah.
and see how it goes, right? Because you never know when your time's up. You don't know. We're only on this planet Earth for a very short period of time. And I truly believe that because I've almost died 4 times. So I can speak from experience,
Yes.
right? I'm not
Yes.
like making this up.
Yes.
Talk about authentic, right? So thank you so much, so much for being here on the Rise of the Goddess. And I so look forward to shining your light, this message. And remember, your activation is our activation. Bye for now. You can say bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.